The stagecoach wheels churned dust into the air as Olivia Davies clutched her worn leather suitcase. The September heat of 1878 bearing down on her weary shoulders. 3 weeks of travel from Boston to the Montana Territory had left her dress wrinkled and her spirit nearly broken, but hope still flickered in her chest like a stubborn flame. That flame wavered dangerously as the coach finally rolled into Weaverville, Montana, a town that seemed more like a scattered collection of wooden buildings than the promising frontier settlement she had imagined in her dreams. Last stop, Weaverville. The driver called, his voice as rough as the terrain they'd traversed. Olivia stepped down from the coach, her boots meeting Montana soil for the first time. At 22, she had left everything behind her position as a seamstress, the small room she'd rented, and the memory of parents lost to influenza 3 years prior. All she had was a bundle of letters from Harold Fletcher, the man who had promised her a home, a future, and perhaps even love in exchange for becoming his wife in this wild territory. "Miss, you need help with that bag?" the driver asked, already unloading the other passenger's luggage. "No, thank you," Olivia replied, summoning a smile. "I can manage." She surveyed the dusty Main Street, searching for the man she had only seen in a small, faded photograph. Harold had described himself as tall with a reddish beard and had promised to meet her stagecoach. But as the other passengers dispersed, claimed by waiting family or friends, Olivia remained alone, a knot formed in her stomach. She approached a weathered old man sitting outside the general store. "Excuse me, sir. I'm looking for Harold Fletcher. Do you know where I might find him?" The old man's rheumy eyes widened slightly. He removed his hat, revealing a shock of white hair. "Miss, I'm afraid. Well, there ain't no easy way to say it. Harold Fletcher's been dead these past 2 weeks. Olivia felt the world tilt beneath her feet. "Dead? But that can't be. I just received a letter from him last month. Fever took him fast, buried him up on the North Hill." The old man nodded toward a small rise visible beyond the town's edge. "I'm mighty sorry to be the one to tell you." Olivia's legs trembled as the reality crashed down upon her. She had traveled thousands of miles to marry a man who now lay beneath the Montana soil. Her future, so carefully planned in letters and dreams, had vanished before it could begin. Is there somewhere I might stay? Just for tonight?" she asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Hotel's down the way," the old man said, pointing to a 2-story building with peeling paint. "Mrs. Hobbs runs it. Tell her Jasper sent you." Olivia nodded her thanks and walked slowly toward the hotel, each step heavier than the last. Inside, Mrs. Hobbs, a thin woman with sharp eyes and a perpetual frown, took one look at Olivia's travel-worn appearance and sighed. "Another one come to find her fortune, I suppose," she said, her voice neither kind nor unkind, merely factual. "I came to marry Harold Fletcher," Olivia replied quietly. "Mrs. Hobbs's expression softened slightly. "Oh, child, you're the mail-order bride he sent for." She shook her head. "Room's 50 cents a night, first one at the top of the stairs." Olivia handed over the coins, precious from her dwindling supply, and trudged up the narrow staircase. The room was sparse but clean: a metal-framed bed, a washstand with a cracked mirror, and a small window overlooking the Main Street. She set her suitcase down, removed her bonnet, and sat heavily on the bed. Only then did she allow the tears to come. Morning light filtered through the thin curtains when Olivia awoke. For a moment, she forgot where she was, and then reality returned with crushing weight. She had no husband, no home, and limited funds in a town where she knew no one. The journey back to Boston was financially impossible. She washed her face in the basin, pinned up her chestnut hair, and changed into her second-best dress, a cornflower blue that Harold had once complimented in a letter. With determined steps, she made her way down to the hotel's small dining area, where Mrs. Hobbs was serving coffee and biscuits to a handful of guests. "I need to see him," Olivia announced, accepting a steaming cup. "Harold, I mean. Where exactly is he buried?" Mrs. Hobbs raised an eyebrow. "North Hill Cemetery. Can't miss it. White picket fence around the graves. His is the fresh one." She hesitated. "What will you do after, miss? Weaverville ain't exactly kind to women without prospects." "I'll figure something out," Olivia replied, though her mind was blank of solutions. After breakfast, she walked through town toward the cemetery. Weaverville was larger than she'd initially thought. Besides the general store and hotel, there was a bank, a saloon, a small church, a schoolhouse, and various shops. Men on horseback passed her, tipping their hats politely or nodding in acknowledgement. Women with children eyed her curiously, no doubt wondering about the unfamiliar face in their midst. The cemetery sat on a gentle slope overlooking Weaverville. A rough wooden gate hung between white picket fencing, and beyond it lay rows of markers, some elaborate stone monuments for the wealthy, others simple wooden crosses for those of modest means. Olivia's heart pounded as she pushed open the gate and stepped inside. She found Harold's grave easily enough. The earth was still mounded and bare of grass. A wooden marker bore his name, age 34, and the date of his death. Olivia stood before it, clutching her handkerchief, unsure what to feel for this man she had never met in person, but with whom she had shared her hopes and dreams through months of correspondence. "I came, Harold," she whispered, "just as I promised." "Most folks don't talk to the dead until they've been here a while," came a deep voice behind her. Olivia whirled around, startled. A tall man stood a few paces away, holding a bouquet of wildflowers. He wore the practical clothing of a rancher: worn boots, denim trousers, a faded shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal sun-browned forearms, and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. When he removed the hat, she saw a handsome face with striking blue eyes and a strong jawline framed by dark blonde hair that needed cutting. "I'm sorry," she said, embarrassed. "I didn't realize anyone else was here." The man stepped forward, placing the flowers on a grave near Harold's. "My ma," he explained briefly, "been gone 5 years now." He studied Olivia with undisguised curiosity. "You knew Fletcher?" "I was to marry him," Olivia admitted, seeing no reason to hide the truth. "I arrived yesterday only to find that you're a mail-order bride who found a grave instead of a groom," the man finished, his expression softening. "I'm sorry, Miss Davies. Olivia Davies, Miss Davies," he nodded respectfully. "I'm Preston Tucker. I own the Double T Ranch about 5 miles outside of town." He hesitated, then added gently, "You're not alone, you know. Weaverville's small, but we look after our own. And since you came to marry Fletcher, well, that makes you almost one of us." Olivia blinked back unexpected tears at his kindness. "Thank you, Mr. Tucker. But I'm afraid I don't know what I'll do now. I can't afford passage back east, and she broke off, unwilling to enumerate all her troubles to this stranger. Preston Tucker regarded her thoughtfully. "Fletcher worked for me. Good ranch hand. Steady. He was fixing up a small cabin on my property to bring you to." He cleared his throat. "It ain't much, but it's nearly finished. You're welcome to stay there while you figure things out." Olivia stared at him. "That's very generous, but I couldn't possibly—" "It's not charity, Miss Davies," he interrupted. "Fletcher's death left me short-handed. My sister Ellen helps with the cooking and such, but she could use help with the household. If you're willing to work, there's a place for you. Temporary, of course, until you decide on something more permanent. Hope flickered in Olivia's chest. "I can cook and clean. I'm also a skilled seamstress." A small smile touched Preston's lips. "Then we have a deal. I'll come by the hotel tomorrow morning to collect you if that suits." "It does. Thank you, Mr. Tucker." "Preston," he corrected. "We don't stand on formality much out here." "Preston," Olivia repeated, finding herself returning his smile. "Then you must call me Olivia." As they walked back toward town together, Olivia felt a strange mix of emotions. Grief for the future she had lost, uncertainty about what lay ahead, but also a small, unexpected spark of something like possibility as she glanced at the tall rancher beside her. The next morning, Olivia was ready when Preston arrived at the hotel. She had packed her few belongings and settled her bill with Mrs. Hobbs, who seemed genuinely pleased that Olivia had found a respectable situation so quickly. "The Tucker place is good land," Mrs. Hobbs told her as she prepared to leave. "Preston's father built it from nothing before the war. Left it to Preston when he passed 5 years back, same time as his wife. Ellen's a sweet girl, though quiet since their parents died. You'll be in good company there." Preston was waiting outside with a wagon, his hat tipped back as he chatted with a local shopkeeper. When he saw Olivia emerge, he straightened and came to take her suitcase. "Sleep well?" he asked, helping her onto the wagon seat. "As well as can be expected," she answered truthfully. The reality of her situation had kept her awake for much of the night, but she had risen determined to face whatever lay ahead with courage. The journey to the Double T Ranch took them through stunning country. They followed a well-worn trail that curved alongside a clear running creek, then climbed gently into rolling hills dotted with pines. Cattle grazed in fenced pastures, and in the distance, snow-capped mountains stood like sentinels against the impossibly blue Montana sky. "It's beautiful," Olivia breathed, taking in the vastness of it all. "Different from Boston, I imagine," Preston remarked, skillfully guiding the horses around a bend in the road. "Very. Everything there feels contained. Here it's as if the world just opens up forever." Preston nodded, understanding in his eyes. "That's what my father loved about it, said a man could breathe out here." He pointed to a rise ahead. "The ranch is just beyond that hill." The Double T Ranch exceeded Olivia's expectations. A substantial 2-story house of hewn logs stood proudly at the center of the property, flanked by a large barn, bunkhouse, stables, and various outbuildings. Fenced corrals held horses, and she could see cattle grazing in the distance. Everything spoke of hard work and careful stewardship. As they pulled up to the house, the front door opened and a young woman stepped onto the porch. She was perhaps 18 or 19, with the same striking blue eyes as Preston but with honey blonde hair braided down her back. "Ellen," Preston called as he helped Olivia down from the wagon. "This is Miss Olivia Davies. She's going to be staying in Fletcher's cabin and helping you with the house." Ellen Tucker smiled shyly. "Hello, Miss Davies. Welcome to the Double T. Please call me Olivia," she replied warmly. "I'll show you to the cabin first," Preston said, "so you can get settled. Then Ellen can familiarize you with the house and such." The cabin was a short walk from the main house, a simple but sturdy structure nestled beneath tall pines. Inside, Olivia found a single room with a stone fireplace, a small table with 2 chairs, a narrow bed, and basic furnishings. A half-curtained area contained a washstand and chamber pot for privacy. "Like I said, it's not much," Preston apologized, setting her suitcase down. Fletcher was still working on it, had plans for proper curtains and such. Olivia ran her hand along the rough-hewn table. "It's perfect, thank you." Preston cleared his throat, suddenly seeming uncomfortable. "Well, I'll leave you to get settled. Ellen will expect you for the midday meal in about an hour." After he left, Olivia sat on the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the swift turn her life had taken. Yesterday, she had arrived in Weaverville expecting to meet her future husband. Today, she was living in the cabin he had prepared for her, but working for his employer instead. The irony wasn't lost on her, nor was the precariousness of her position. This arrangement with Preston was temporary, a kindness offered to a woman in desperate circumstances. Eventually, she would need to find her own way. Still, as she unpacked her few belongings, Olivia allowed herself to feel a small measure of hope. Perhaps this unexpected detour would lead somewhere worth going after all. The next few weeks passed in a blur of new routines and adjustments. Olivia quickly proved her worth in the Tucker household, taking over much of the cooking and helping Ellen with the endless chores required to keep a large ranch running smoothly. She mended shirts for the ranch hands, baked bread that earned enthusiastic praise, and even helped Ellen preserve the last of the garden's bounty for the coming winter. Ellen, initially shy, gradually warmed to Olivia's presence. The younger woman had been carrying the burden of running the household since her mother's death, and having help clearly relieved some of her strain. They developed an easy friendship, working side by side during the day and sometimes sitting together in the evenings while Ellen practiced her reading or Olivia sewed. Preston was often gone from dawn until dusk, managing the ranch's operations with quiet competence. When their paths crossed at meals or in the evenings, he was unfailingly polite but somewhat reserved. Occasionally, Olivia would catch him watching her with an unreadable expression, only to look away quickly when she noticed. One evening in early October, as Olivia was returning to her cabin after supper, Preston fell into step beside her. "Mind if I walk with you?" he asked, his breath visible in the cooling autumn air. "Not at all," she replied, wrapping her shawl tighter around her shoulders. They walked in companionable silence until they reached her cabin. Instead of bidding her good night, however, Preston gestured to the small porch. "Could we sit a moment? There's something I'd like to discuss." Curious, Olivia nodded. They settled on the rough wooden bench that Preston had added to the porch the previous week. "You've been a great help these past weeks," he began, turning his hat in his hands. "Ellen's happier than I've seen her in years, and the men are mighty pleased with the improvements to their meals." "I'm glad," Olivia said, wondering where this conversation was heading. "Thing is," Preston continued, "winter's coming on fast. This cabin, it's not properly insulated yet. Fletcher was planning to add more chinking between the logs and put in a proper wood floor before the cold set in." He looked up at her, concern evident in his expression. "It won't be fit for living once the real cold arrives." Olivia's heart sank. She had grown comfortable in her little cabin and at the double T. "I see. I suppose I should start looking for other arrangements in town then." "That's not what I meant," Preston said quickly. "We have plenty of room in the main house. There's a bedroom next to Ellen's that hasn't been used in years. I thought you might consider moving in there, at least for the winter." Relief flooded through Olivia, followed by uncertainty. "Are you sure that would be appropriate? People might talk." Preston's mouth quirked in a half-smile. "People always talk, Olivia, but no one who knows me would think anything improper of it. Ellen would be right next door and my room is downstairs." He hesitated. "Besides, I was hoping you might consider staying on permanently. Ellen needs a companion closer to her age, and you've proven yourself invaluable to the running of the household." Olivia studied his face in the fading light, trying to read the emotions behind his carefully chosen words. "Are you offering me a position, Preston, as a housekeeper?" He met her gaze steadily. "For now, yes, though I hope. That is, I've grown to." He stopped, seeming frustrated with his inability to express himself. Let's just say I value your presence here, Olivia, more than I expected to." Before she could respond, a shout from the direction of the bunkhouse interrupted them. One of the ranch hands was running toward them, waving urgently. "Boss, riders coming in from the east fence line. Jim's been shot." Preston was on his feet instantly. "Get Doc Wilson from town," he ordered, then turned to Olivia. "I'm sorry, go," she urged him. "We can finish this conversation later." The next hours passed in a flurry of activity as Jim Farley, one of the older ranch hands, was brought in with a bullet wound to his shoulder. According to the men who had been with him, they'd encountered rustlers trying to drive off a small herd of Double T cattle. In the ensuing gunfight, Jim had been hit before the rustlers retreated. Olivia and Ellen worked alongside the doctor when he arrived, boiling water, preparing bandages, and assisting as he extracted the bullet and stitched the wound. By the time Jim was resting comfortably in the bunkhouse, dawn was breaking over the eastern hills. "You two get some rest," Preston told Olivia and Ellen, his face lined with exhaustion. "You've done more than enough." "What about the rustlers?" Ellen asked worriedly. "Will they come back?" Preston's expression hardened. "Not if I can help it. I'm riding out with some of the men to track them." "We need to send a message that the Double T isn't easy pickings." Alarm shot through Olivia. "Isn't that dangerous? Shouldn't you let the sheriff handle this?" "Sheriff Collins is a good man, but his jurisdiction is large and his deputies few," Preston explained. "By the time he could organize a posse, those rustlers would be long gone with our cattle." His expression softened slightly at her obvious concern. "Don't worry. We're not looking for a fight, just our cattle and maybe enough information to help the sheriff later." Olivia wanted to argue further but held her tongue. This was Preston's world, not hers, and she had no right to question his judgment in such matters. Preston and 4 of his men rode out an hour later, after the ranch hands had eaten and the horses had been prepared. Olivia stood with Ellen on the porch, watching them disappear into the morning mist. "He'll be all right," Ellen said, slipping her arm through Olivia's. "Preston knows what he's doing. He was a scout during the war, you know." Olivia hadn't known. In fact, she realized she knew very little about Preston Tucker's past, despite living on his ranch for nearly a month. "How old was he? During the war, I mean." "He lied about his age to enlist," Ellen explained as they walked back inside. "He was only 16 when he joined up in 62. By the time he came home in 65, he was a different person, quieter, more serious." She glanced at Olivia. "He doesn't talk about it much, but I know he saw terrible things." "And your parents, were they alive when he returned?" Ellen nodded. "Pa was so proud of him, even though he'd been against Preston enlisting. Ma just cried for days when he came home safe." Her voice softened with memory. "They were good people, my parents. Pa built this ranch from nothing, and Ma made it a home. When they died, fever took them both within a week of each other." Preston stepped up. "He was only 26, but he took over everything, including raising me." "He's a good man," Olivia said quietly. Ellen's blue eyes, so like her brother's, studied Olivia thoughtfully. "He is. The best I know." She hesitated. "He likes you, you know. I haven't seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you since before the war, when he was sweet on Mary Jenkins." Olivia felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Ellen, you don't have to say anything," Ellen interrupted gently. "I just thought you should know. Preston won't speak of his feelings easily, not after everything he's been through. But they're all the same." The conversation lingered in Olivia's mind as she finally retired to her cabin for a few hours of much-needed rest. Preston Tucker was indeed a good man, honorable, hardworking, and kind. And if she was being honest with herself, she had begun to develop feelings for him as well. But she had come to Montana to marry Harold Fletcher, a man she had never met but with whom she had shared months of letters. Was it disloyal to be thinking of another man so soon? And yet, as she drifted toward sleep, Olivia couldn't help but remember Preston's words on that first day at the cemetery. "You're not alone." In the month since, he had proven the truth of that statement in countless ways, offering her not just shelter and work, but a place to belong. Preston and his men returned 3 days later, driving before them 24 cattle that bore the Double T brand. They looked trail-worn and weary but triumphant. As they rode into the yard, Olivia and Ellen rushed out to meet them. "You found them," Ellen exclaimed, relief evident in her voice. Preston dismounted, wincing slightly as his feet hit the ground. "Found the cattle and the rustlers. Turned the men over to a deputy we ran into near Clark's Creek." He looked toward Olivia, a small smile touching his lips despite his exhaustion. "Miss me?" The question was light, teasing even, but something in his eyes made Olivia's heart beat faster. "The coffee certainly did," she replied, matching his tone. "No one's complained about it being strong enough to stand a spoon in for 3 whole days." Preston laughed, a rare sound that transformed his face. "Well, we can't have that. I'll be sure to register my complaints at supper." His smile faded as he took in her appearance more carefully. "You look tired. Have you been sleeping?" The truth was, she hadn't slept well since he'd left, worried about his safety and turning over their unfinished conversation in her mind. But all she said was, "Well enough." "You're the one who looks like you could use a good meal and a proper bed." "Can't argue with that," he agreed. "Just need to get these boys settled first." After the cattle had been returned to their proper pasture and the horses cared for, Preston joined Olivia and Ellen for a late supper. He ate heartily, complimenting Olivia on the stew and cornbread she'd prepared. As they were finishing, Ellen yawned dramatically. "I think I'll turn in early," she announced, a suspiciously innocent look on her face. "Olivia, would you mind clearing up without me? I'm absolutely exhausted." Before Olivia could respond, Ellen had disappeared upstairs, leaving her alone with Preston. An awkward silence fell between them. "More coffee," Olivia offered, rising to fetch the pot. "Please." Preston watched her move around the kitchen. "So, have you thought about what we discussed?" "Before I left, I mean." Olivia poured his coffee, buying herself a moment to collect her thoughts. "About moving to the main house for winter. Yes, I've thought about it." And she set the pot down and met his gaze directly. "I'm grateful for the offer, truly. But I'm not sure what my future holds, Preston. I came here to be a wife, to start a family. Working as your housekeeper is fine for now, but eventually you'll want more," he finished for her. "That's fair enough." He seemed to be wrestling with something, his fingers tapping against his coffee cup. "Olivia, there's something I need to tell you about Harold Fletcher." A chill ran through her. "What about him?" Preston sighed heavily. "When Fletcher first came to work for me 2 years ago, he was running from something, wouldn't say what, but I could tell. He worked hard, kept to himself mostly. Then about 8 months ago, he started getting letters from back east. His mood changed, he seemed happier, more settled." He paused. "That's when he started fixing up the cabin. Said he was bringing a bride out from Boston." "That would have been when we began corresponding," Olivia said softly. Preston nodded. "I was glad for him. Everyone deserves a chance at happiness." His expression darkened. "But then about 3 months ago, a man came looking for him. Said Fletcher had swindled his sister out of her savings back in Ohio before disappearing west." Olivia felt as if the floor had dropped away beneath her feet. "What?" I confronted Fletcher about it. He denied it at first, then admitted that, yes, he'd been engaged to a woman in Ohio, had taken money from her to start their life together, but had gotten cold feet and left. Preston's eyes were gentle but direct. "I asked him if he was doing the same thing again, if he was getting money from you. He swore he wasn't, that this time was different, that he truly intended to marry you. He never asked me for money, Olivia said faintly, trying to process this revelation about the man she'd thought she knew through his letters. But he did ask a lot of questions about my inheritance from my parents. I'm sorry, Olivia. I should have told you sooner. It just didn't seem right to speak ill of him when you just learned of his death. Preston reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of hers. For what it's worth, I believe he may have been sincere about you. In the weeks before he fell ill, he worked on that cabin every spare moment he had. Olivia sat in stunned silence, reevaluating everything she thought she had known about Harold Fletcher. The letters that had seemed so sincere, so full of hopes for their future together, had they been just another confidence scheme? Or had he truly intended to make a fresh start with her? I don't know what to think, she admitted finally. All these weeks, I've been mourning him, feeling guilty about. She stopped, suddenly aware of what she had been about to reveal. About what? Preston prompted gently. Olivia looked up at him, at this man who had shown her nothing but kindness and respect since the moment they met. About having feelings for someone else, she said quietly. For you. The words hung in the air between them. Preston's eyes widened slightly, and for a moment, Olivia feared she had misread everything, had made a terrible mistake in confessing her feelings. Then slowly, deliberately, he reached across the table and took her hand in his. Olivia Davies, he said, his voice rough with emotion, I've been falling in love with you since I found you talking to a gravestone. I just didn't think I had any right to say so. Why not? She whispered. Because you came here to marry another man. Because you deserve time to grieve. Because I'm just a rancher with calloused hands and too many responsibilities, and you're... He gestured vaguely. You're like sunshine after a long winter. Tears pricked at Olivia's eyes. Preston Tucker, that's the most poetic thing I've ever heard you say. A flush crept up his neck. Don't get used to it. I'm not much for pretty words. I don't need pretty words, Olivia said, squeezing his hand. I just need honesty. Preston nodded, his expression solemn. Then honestly, Olivia, I'd like you to stay. Not as a housekeeper, but, well, I'm not proposing marriage this very minute. We should take some time to be sure, but I'd like to court you properly, if you're willing. Joy bubbled up inside her, unexpected but undeniable. I'm willing, she said softly. The months that followed were among the happiest of Olivia's life. She moved into the main house as planned, taking the bedroom next to Ellen's, and continued to help with the household duties, but now as a member of the family rather than an employee. Preston courted her with a charming mix of determination and uncertainty, bringing her wildflowers when they bloomed on the hillsides, carving a delicate wooden box for her sewing notions, and taking her on rides to show her the full beauty of the Double T's extensive lands. Winter came to the Montana territory with a fierce intensity that Olivia, accustomed to Boston's milder climate, found both terrifying and exhilarating. Snow piled high around the ranch buildings, and on the coldest days, the family gathered close to the fireplace, reading, talking, or simply enjoying each other's company in comfortable silence. Ellen blossomed with Olivia's companionship, revealing herself to be not only intelligent and kind, but possessed of a dry wit that often caught Olivia by surprise. The two women became genuine friends, confiding in each other and supporting one another through the isolation that winter brought to the remote ranch. As for Preston, Olivia discovered new facets of his character daily. Beneath his reserved exterior lay a man of deep feeling, quiet intelligence, and unexpected humor. He was firm but fair with his men, gentle with animals, and unfailingly respectful toward Olivia. If he sometimes woke in the night, troubled by memories of the war, he never spoke of it directly, but Olivia came to recognize the signs in his eyes the next morning and learned to offer comfort without pressing for details he wasn't ready to share. Spring arrived with a burst of wildflowers and new calves in the pastures. As the land reawakened, so too did the ranch's busy rhythms. Olivia found herself fully integrated into life at the Double T, her days filled with purpose, and her heart with growing love for both the land and the man who worked it with such dedication. One evening in late April, Preston suggested a ride to a spot he wanted to show her. They set out as the sun began its descent, casting long golden shadows across the newly green landscape. Preston led her along a winding trail that climbed steadily upward until they reached a high meadow overlooking the entire valley. The Double T spread out below them, peaceful in the evening light. "It's breathtaking," Olivia said, dismounting from her horse. "My father brought my mother here when he was courting her," Preston said, coming to stand beside her. "Said he wanted to show her the kingdom he was offering." He laughed softly. "Ma told me later she wasn't impressed with his kingdom talk, but she fell in love with the view anyway." "I can see why," Olivia replied, gazing out over the patchwork of pastures, the silver ribbon of the creek, and the sturdy buildings that made up the heart of the ranch. Preston took her hand, turning her gently to face him. "Olivia, I brought you here for a reason." He drew a deep breath. "These past months have been the happiest I can remember. You've brought light and laughter back to our home. You've helped Ellen become the young woman our parents always hoped she'd be, and you've made me believe in second chances." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet pouch. "This was my mother's," he said, tipping a delicate gold ring with a small diamond into his palm. "My father saved for 3 years to buy it for her." His eyes, earnest and vulnerable, met hers. "I know it's not grand, but it comes with all my heart and everything I have. Olivia Davies, will you marry me?" Olivia felt tears of joy spring to her eyes. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Preston Tucker, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms, kissing her with all the pent-up longing of months of proper courtship. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, the setting sun had painted the sky in spectacular shades of pink and gold. "When?" Preston asked, still holding her close. "Soon," Olivia replied, resting her head against his chest. "I don't see any reason to wait." They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Weaverville. The entire town turned out for the occasion. Preston was well respected, and Olivia had made friends during her visits to town. Ellen served as Olivia's maid of honor, beaming with happiness for her brother and soon-to-be sister-in-law. Even Mrs. Hobbs from the hotel attended, nodding approvingly as Olivia, radiant in a gown she had sewn herself, walked down the aisle to where Preston waited, handsome in his best suit. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt, the celebration afterward joyous. As the new Mrs. Tucker danced with her husband under lantern light in the town square, Olivia marveled at the strange, winding path that had brought her to this moment of perfect happiness. "What are you thinking?" Preston murmured in her ear as they swayed to the music. "That sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as our greatest disappointments," she replied, thinking of that first day in Weaverville when she had learned of Harold Fletcher's death. "I came here looking for one future and found something so much better instead." Preston's arms tightened around her. "I thank God every day that you stayed." "So do I," she whispered back. "So do I." Life as Mrs. Preston Tucker settled into a rhythm that suited Olivia perfectly. She took over the management of the household with confidence, freeing Preston to focus on the ranch's operations and Ellen to pursue her interest in teaching at the Weaverville school. The three of them formed a tight-knit family unit, supporting each other through the challenges and joys that ranch life brought. Their first real test came that autumn, when an early blizzard caught everyone by surprise. Preston and several of his men were out on the range, moving cattle to winter pastures, when the storm hit with unexpected ferocity. Olivia and Ellen waited anxiously as the hours stretched on with no sign of the men. "They'll shelter somewhere," Ellen assured Olivia, though worry lined her young face. "Preston knows every cave and abandoned line shack for 20 miles around." "I know," Olivia said, trying to keep her voice steady for Ellen's sake. "I'm sure they're fine." But as night fell and the storm showed no signs of abating, Olivia's concern deepened into real fear. What if Preston was lost in the blinding snow? What if he was injured or worse? The thought of losing him now, when their life together was just beginning, was almost unbearable. She kept the fire roaring and food warming on the stove, ready for the men's return. Ellen eventually fell asleep in a chair, exhausted from worry, but Olivia remained alert, listening for any sound above the howling wind. It was well past midnight when she heard the faint jingling of harness bells, nearly lost in the storm. Olivia threw open the door, heedless of the snow that blew in, and peered into the darkness. Shadowy figures emerged from the swirling white men on horseback, moving slowly toward the house. "Preston," she called, her voice breaking with relief. One of the riders urged his horse forward, separating from the group. As he drew closer, Olivia could see it was indeed her husband, snow crusted on his beard and hat, but wonderfully, blessedly alive. "Get inside, woman," he shouted over the wind. "We'll stable the horses and be right in." Olivia obeyed, waking Ellen with the good news before bustling about to prepare hot coffee and food for the frozen men. When they finally stumbled through the door, stomping snow from their boots, she nearly wept with relief. "Thought we were goners for sure," one of the ranch hands admitted as he wrapped his hands around a steaming mug. "But the boss wouldn't hear of it, said he had a wife waiting and he wasn't about to disappoint her." Preston, thawing by the fire, shot the man a look that was half embarrassment, half warning. But when Olivia brought him coffee and a bowl of stew, he caught her hand and pressed it to his cold cheek. "I kept thinking of you," he said quietly, for her ears alone. "Every time I wanted to stop, to rest just for a minute in that snow, I thought of you waiting and I kept going." Olivia bent to kiss his forehead, uncaring of the ranch hands watching. "I'll always be waiting," she promised, "but I'd prefer if you didn't make a habit of nearly freezing to death." Preston's laugh, though weary, was genuine. "Yes, madam." That night, with Preston safely asleep beside her, Olivia realized the depth of her love for him, a love that had grown naturally and steadily from respect and friendship into something powerful enough to guide a man home through a blizzard. It wasn't the romantic fantasy she had imagined when exchanging letters with Harold Fletcher. It was something far more real and enduring. The following spring brought a new blessing to the Tucker household. Olivia's suspicions were confirmed by Doc Wilson. She was expecting their first child. Preston's reaction to the news was everything she could have hoped for: joy mixed with protectiveness, and a touch of male pride that made her laugh even as she wiped away happy tears. "A baby," he kept saying, as if he couldn't quite believe it. "Our baby." Ellen was equally thrilled at the prospect of becoming an aunt. She immediately began planning all the things she would teach her niece or nephew, from reading to riding to recognizing the different wildflowers that carpeted the hills in springtime. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer and into the early fall. Olivia remained active, though Preston fretted whenever she did anything more strenuous than pour a cup of tea. She teased him about his overprotectiveness, but secretly loved the tender concern behind it. As her time drew near, Preston insisted on bringing Doc Wilson to stay at the ranch, unwilling to risk Olivia being without medical care when her labor began. The doctor arrived with good grace, settling into a guest room and assuring the nervous father to be that everything appeared perfectly normal. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time, Tucker," he reminded Preston with a touch of amusement. "Your wife is healthy and strong. Try not to wear yourself out with worry before the little one even arrives." But when Olivia's labor began on a crisp October morning, no amount of logical reassurance could calm Preston's fears. He paced outside their bedroom, wincing at each cry of pain from within, until Ellen finally took pity on him. "Go check on the new foal," she suggested, "or chop some wood, or dig a well. Anything but wear a hole in Mama's good rug with your pacing." Preston managed a weak smile at his sister's attempt at humor. "I can't leave, Ellen. What if she needs me? Doc Wilson and I are with her," Ellen assured him. "And believe me, if she asks for you, I'll come running." Hours passed. The sun crossed the sky and began its descent toward the western hills. Ranch hands came and went, offering awkward but sincere good wishes to their boss as he continued his vigil. Finally, as dusk was falling, a new sound emerged from behind the bedroom door, the thin, indignant wail of a newborn. Preston froze, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might burst from his chest. When the door finally opened and Ellen appeared, her face tired but radiant, he could barely form the question. "A boy," Ellen told him, her smile wide. "You have a son, Preston, a beautiful, healthy son." He stumbled forward on legs gone suddenly weak, entering the bedroom where Olivia lay propped against pillows, her face pale but glowing with an inner light as she cradled a small bundle in her arms. She looked up as he approached, and the love in her eyes nearly brought him to his knees. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Preston sat carefully on the edge of the bed, hardly daring to breathe as Olivia placed the tiny infant in his arms. The baby was impossibly small, with a shock of dark hair and a face that was still red and wrinkled from birth. As Preston watched in wonder, the infant opened his eyes blue, like all newborns, but with a clarity that seemed to look straight into his father's soul. "He's perfect," Preston whispered, throat tight with emotion. "Olivia, he's absolutely perfect. What shall we call him?" she asked, reaching out to stroke the baby's cheek. Preston thought for a moment. "What about James? After my father, James Tucker." Olivia tested the name. "It's strong, dignified." "James Harold Tucker," Preston amended quietly, "if that's all right with you." Olivia's eyes filled with tears at the unexpected gesture. "Are you sure?" Preston nodded. "If not for Harold Fletcher, you would never have come to Montana, never have stayed in Weaverville. I would never have found you." He looked down at his son. "Whatever else he may have been, I owe him that much." Olivia reached for her husband's hand, squeezing it in silent understanding. It was a generous gesture, one that acknowledged the complex path that had brought them together while honoring their present joy. "James Harold Tucker," she agreed. "Welcome to the world, little one." Little James thrived, growing stronger with each passing day. He had his father's blue eyes and his mother's determined chin, a combination that promised both stubbornness and charm in equal measure. Preston proved to be an attentive father, often carrying James with him around the ranch when Olivia needed rest, introducing his son to horses and cattle, and the vast Montana sky, as if the infant could understand every word. "He's building quite the legacy for that boy," Doc Wilson observed before departing the ranch a week after the birth. "Preston Tucker was always a good man, but fatherhood suits him particularly well." "Everything's changed since he was born," Olivia agreed, watching through the window as Preston, with James bundled against his chest, pointed out something to one of the ranch hands. "It's as if the world is new again." The doctor patted her hand. "That's as it should be, Mrs. Tucker." Children remind us that life goes on, that there's always reason for hope. He gathered his medical bag. Now remember what I told you: plenty of rest, good food, and don't be afraid to ask for help. That sister-in-law of yours is eager to do her part. Indeed, Ellen had taken to Aunt Hood with enthusiasm, insisting on her fair share of baby-holding time and already reading to James from her collection of books, claiming it was never too early to develop a love of learning. The three adults established a rhythm that allowed each of them time with the baby while ensuring household and ranch duties were still attended to. As Christmas approached, Olivia found herself reflecting on the incredible changes a year had brought. Last Christmas, she had been newly engaged to Preston, still adjusting to life in Montana, still occasionally haunted by thoughts of the man she had come west to marry. This Christmas, she was Mrs. Tucker, mother to James, and more deeply rooted in the double T than she could have imagined possible. On Christmas Eve, with a fire crackling in the hearth and pine boughs decorating the mantel, the small family gathered in the parlor. Ellen had insisted on a tree, which Preston and the men had cut from the hillside and set up in the corner, decorated with paper stars, dried berries, and small carved wooden ornaments that Preston had made in his spare moments. "I have something for you," Preston said to Olivia after they had exchanged their other gifts. He handed her a small package wrapped in brown paper. Olivia unwrapped it carefully to find a leather-bound journal. Opening it, she discovered page after page filled with Preston's neat, precise handwriting. "What is this?" she asked, running her fingers over the words. "Our story," he replied simply. "From the day we met at Fletcher's grave until the day James was born. I started writing it down when I realized I wanted to remember every moment, to tell him someday how his family came to be." Tears pricked at Olivia's eyes as she read a random passage. Today, Olivia laughed so hard at one of the new colt's antics that she nearly fell off the fence. "I caught her just in time, and for a moment, with her in my arms and the sun in her hair, I couldn't remember why I'd ever thought happiness wasn't meant for me. Preston," she whispered, "this is beautiful." He ducked his head, embarrassed but pleased. "Figured our son should know where he comes from, the good and the hard parts both." He reached for her hand. "And I wanted you to know that not a day goes by that I don't thank God for bringing you to Weaverville, even if the way it happened was painful." Ellen, who had been discreetly busying herself with the baby, looked up with suspiciously bright eyes. "Well, if we're making grand declarations, I have one too." She straightened, suddenly looking more woman than girl. "I've been offered the teacher's position at the school in town, starting in January." "Ellen, that's wonderful," Olivia exclaimed. Preston regarded his sister with a mixture of pride and concern. "Are you sure, Elle? It's a big responsibility." "I'm sure," Ellen said firmly. "It's what I want. And before you start worrying about how I'll get back and forth, I've already worked it out with Mrs. Hobbs to take a room at the hotel during the week. I'll come home on weekends." Preston opened his mouth, clearly about to object, but Olivia laid a hand on his arm. "Your sister is a grown woman now," she reminded him gently, "and a talented teacher. The children of Weaverville will be lucky to have her." After a moment, Preston nodded. "You're right, of course." He looked at Ellen with newfound respect. "You'll make a fine teacher, Elle. Just promise you'll be careful in town." Ellen rolled her eyes good-naturedly. "Yes, big brother, I'll be the very model of propriety." She grinned. "Besides, who has time for scandalous behavior when there are grammar lessons to plan?" As they laughed together, James awakened in his cradle, announcing his hunger with increasingly insistent cries. Olivia rose to tend to him, lifting him to her shoulder as she headed toward the stairs for some privacy. "Wait," Preston called softly. She turned back to find him watching her with such love in his eyes that it took her breath away. "Merry Christmas, Mrs. Tucker." "Merry Christmas, Mr. Tucker," she replied, her heart full to bursting. As she nursed James in the quiet of their bedroom, Olivia thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. She had left Boston in search of a husband, traveling thousands of miles to marry a man she knew only through letters. Instead, she had found a grave and with it, an unexpected beginning rather than the end she had feared. "You're not alone," Preston had told her that day at the cemetery, and he had made good on those words in every way possible. He had given her not just a home, but a family, a purpose, and a love deeper than she had ever dared to hope for. Outside, snow began to fall, dusting the Montana landscape in white. Inside, warmed by fire and family and newfound joy, Olivia Tucker held her son close and knew with perfect certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Spring arrived early the following year, bringing with it lush green grass for the cattle and an explosion of wildflowers across the hillsides. James, now 6 months old, was growing into a sturdy, curious baby who delighted in the world around him. He had begun to sit up on his own and was showing signs of wanting to crawl, much to his father's pride and his mother's mild consternation. "He's going to be into everything once he gets mobile," Olivia predicted as she watched Preston encourage the baby's efforts on a quilt spread in the yard. "That's my boy," Preston said, grinning as James lunged forward, still more belly flop than proper crawl, eager to explore his kingdom. Olivia rolled her eyes at the reference to Preston's father's old joke, but her heart swelled with love for her little family. The ranch was thriving under Preston's careful management. Ellen was flourishing in her role as Weaverville's schoolteacher, and James was healthy and happy. Life had settled into a comfortable pattern that felt both secure and deeply satisfying. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in gold and purple, Preston cleared his throat in a way that Olivia had come to recognize as a prelude to something important. "I've been thinking," he began, his fingers idly stroking the back of her hand, "about expanding the ranch." Olivia turned to look at him, curious. "Expanding? How?" "The Hartley place to the north is going up for sale. Old man Hartley's moving to Oregon to live with his daughter." Preston's voice was carefully neutral, but Olivia could sense his excitement beneath the calm exterior. "It's good land, 300 acres with water rights to the North Fork of the creek. Would connect nicely to our existing pastures." "Can we afford it?" Olivia asked practically. Preston nodded. "Cattle prices have been strong and we've set aside a fair amount these past couple of years. It would be a stretch, but I think it's a sound investment for our future." He glanced at James, who was dozing in Olivia's arms, "For his future especially." Olivia considered the proposition. She trusted Preston's judgment in such matters. He had proven himself a skilled and prudent rancher. "Then I think you should make an offer," she said finally. "If you believe it's right for the Double T, I support you." Preston's face broke into a smile and he leaned over to kiss her softly. "Thank you. I'll ride into town tomorrow to speak with Hartley's lawyer." He hesitated, then added, "There's one more thing. The Hartley place comes with a house smaller than this one, but solid. I was thinking we might fix it up for Ellen." "For Ellen?" Olivia repeated, surprised. "She's been hinting that she'd like to stay in town permanently now that she's settled into teaching," Preston explained. "And I understand why the daily ride is wearing, even with her staying at the hotel most nights. But I don't like the idea of her living alone in town indefinitely." Olivia nodded thoughtfully. At 20, Ellen was certainly old enough to make such decisions for herself, but Weaverville, like any frontier town, presented certain challenges for a young woman on her own. The Hartley house is maybe 2 miles from our northern boundary, Preston continued. Close enough that she could ride over easily or we to her, but with enough independence to satisfy her, and in time if she were to marry. He shrugged. It would make a fine wedding gift. Has she caught someone's eye? Olivia asked, curious if she had missed some sign of Ellen's romantic interests. Preston chuckled. Not that she's admitted to me, but she's a pretty, smart young woman in a town with plenty of unmarried men. It's only a matter of time. His expression grew more serious. I want her to know she always has a place of her own, no matter what. Olivia's heart warmed at his concern for his sister. I think it's a wonderful idea. Ellen will love having her own home while still being connected to the ranch. The purchase of the Hartley property went through smoothly, and the summer was spent integrating the new acreage into the double TTCS operations. Preston hired 2 additional ranch hands to help manage the expanded herd, and work began on renovating the Hartley house for Ellen, who was delighted by her brother's plans. "My own house," she exclaimed when Preston showed her the property. "Preston, it's perfect. Close enough to reach the school easily, but with all this wonderful space around it." The house was indeed charming, a 1-story structure built of logs and local stone, with a wide porch and large windows that caught the morning sun. It needed some repairs and updating, but the bones were good, and Ellen threw herself into planning the renovations with enthusiasm, often consulting with Olivia about furnishings and decor. By late summer, the house was ready, and Ellen moved in with a combination of furniture from the main house and new pieces purchased in Weaverville or ordered from catalogs. Preston insisted on riding over every few days to check on her, a practice that Ellen tolerated with good-natured exasperation. "I'm perfectly capable of living on my own, you know," she told him after his 3rd visit in a week. "I can even manage to lock my doors at night without a reminder." "Humor me," Preston replied, unrepentant. "I've been looking after you since you were 14. Old habits die hard." James celebrated his 1st birthday in October with a small gathering that included several neighboring families and most of the ranch hands. He had grown into a sturdy, cheerful toddler who was now walking with increasing confidence and developing a vocabulary that consisted mostly of "mama," "dada," and enthusiastic babbling that only his parents could interpret. Life settled into a new rhythm that winter. Ellen joined them for Sunday dinners and often stayed overnight, returning to her own home on Monday mornings to prepare for the school week. The expanded ranch operations kept Preston busy, while Olivia divided her time between caring for James, managing the household, and working on her sewing projects, which had expanded to include custom work for several families in Weaverville. As spring approached once more, Olivia found herself facing the return of familiar symptoms: fatigue, sensitivity to certain smells, and morning nausea. A visit from Doc Wilson confirmed her suspicions. She was expecting their 2nd child. Preston's reaction was, if possible, even more joyful than the first time. "Another baby," he marveled, holding her close. "James will have a brother or sister to grow up with. Just like you and Ellen," Olivia pointed out, smiling at his enthusiasm. Preston nodded, his expression softening at the comparison. "Family is everything, Olivia. When I lost my parents, Ellen was what kept me going, knowing she needed me, that I couldn't fall apart because she was counting on me." He laid a gentle hand on her still flat stomach. "Our children will always have each other, no matter what happens." "Nothing's going to happen," Olivia assured him, though she understood the lingering fears that drove his concern. Death had taken so many people from Preston's life: his parents, friends in the war, Harold Fletcher. It was natural that he would worry about history repeating itself, "Of course not," he agreed quickly. "But still, it's good they'll have each other." His smile returned, brightening his handsome face. "And us, for a very long time to come." The pregnancy progressed without complications through the spring and summer. James, now nearly 2, was fascinated by the changes in his mother's body, patting her growing belly and listening with wide-eyed wonder when Preston explained that a baby brother or sister was growing inside. "Baby," he would say solemnly, pressing his small hand against Olivia's stomach. Ellen was equally excited about the prospect of another niece or nephew. She spent her summer break from teaching helping at the main house, taking James for walks to give Olivia rest and preparing the nursery for its new occupant. "I think it's a girl this time," she declared one afternoon as she and Olivia folded tiny garments. "James needs a sister to keep him in line," Olivia laughed. "Is that what you did for Preston? Kept him in line?" "Tried to," Ellen replied with a grin. "Wasn't always successful, mind you. He's the stubbornest man in the Montana Territory, possibly in the entire United States." "I've noticed," Olivia said dryly, thinking of her husband's occasional bouts of immovability when he believed he was right. It was a quality that made him an excellent rancher, but sometimes a challenging spouse. Ellen's expression grew more serious. "He wasn't always like that, you know. Before the war he was lighter, more carefree." She smoothed a small blanket with careful hands. "When he came back, something in him had hardened, like he'd seen too much darkness to ever fully trust in light again." Olivia nodded, understanding. Though Preston rarely spoke of his experiences during the Civil War, she had glimpsed the shadows that sometimes crossed his face when certain topics arose, had felt him startle awake from nightmares he refused to discuss. "That's why I'm so grateful for you and James," Ellen continued. "And this new baby. You've brought that light back into his life." He laughs again, really laughs like he used to before. "He's brought light into my life too," Olivia said softly. "When I arrived in Weaverville and found out Harold was dead, I thought my future had ended before it began. Preston showed me it was just taking a different path than I'd expected." Ellen reached over to squeeze her hand. "The best paths often do." The baby arrived in early August, earlier than expected but healthy and strong nonetheless. The labor was quicker than with James, though no less intense, and by midnight, Preston was once again holding a newborn in his trembling hands this time, a daughter with a shock of dark hair like her brother's and her mother's delicate features. "She's beautiful," he whispered, awe evident in his voice. "Perfect in every way." "What shall we name her?" Olivia asked, exhausted but radiant with joy. Preston thought for a moment, then suggested, "What about Mary, after my mother?" "Mary," Olivia repeated, testing the name. "Mary Ellen Tucker." Preston's eyes brightened at the addition of his sister's name. "Ellen will be over the moon." Indeed, when Ellen arrived the following morning, having received word of the birth, she burst into tears at learning her niece's full name. "You didn't have to do that," she protested, even as she cradled the infant with obvious delight. "We wanted to," Olivia assured her. "You're such an important part of our family, Ellen. It seemed right to acknowledge that." James, initially wary of the tiny, noisy creature who had suddenly appeared in their home, gradually warmed to his role as big brother. Under careful supervision, he would pat Mary's head gently or bring his favorite toys to show her, seemingly unbothered by her complete lack of interest in them. "Good baby," he would pronounce solemnly after each interaction, making his parents laugh with his serious demeanor. As summer faded into fall, the Tucker family settled into new routines to accommodate their expanded numbers. Preston, already a devoted father to James, proved equally smitten with his daughter, often carrying her with him around the ranch as he had done with his son. She needs to learn the business early, he would say when Olivia raised an eyebrow at the sight of him discussing cattle breeding with Mary cradled in one arm. I'm sure she's absorbing every word, Olivia would reply, hiding her smile at his earnestness. On a crisp October evening, as the family sat on the porch enjoying the sunset, Preston and Olivia on the swing, James playing with wooden blocks at their feet, and Mary asleep in her mother's arms, Preston suddenly chuckled to himself. "What's so amusing?" Olivia asked, glancing up at him. "I was just thinking," he replied, his arm warm around her shoulders, "about that day at the cemetery, when I found you talking to Fletcher's grave." His eyes, reflecting the golden light of sunset, held a mixture of tenderness and wonder. If someone had told me then that 3 years later we'd be sitting here with 2 beautiful children and more happiness than I ever thought possible, I'd have called them crazy. "Life has a way of surprising us," Olivia agreed, leaning her head against his shoulder. "Sometimes in the most wonderful ways." Preston pressed a kiss to her temple. "I'm just grateful you stayed, Olivia, that you didn't get right back on that stagecoach when you found out Fletcher was gone." "Where would I have gone?" she asked softly. "Back to Boston, where I had nothing and no one." She looked up at him, her heart full of love for this man who had become her world. "Besides, a very kind cowboy told me I wasn't alone, and he was right." Preston's arm tightened around her, and together they watched the sun sink behind the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple. James, tired from his day of toddler adventures, climbed into his father's lap and promptly fell asleep against his chest. Mary stirred briefly in Olivia's arms before settling back into contented slumber. In that perfect moment, surrounded by her family on the porch of the home they had built together, Olivia Davies Tucker knew a peace and happiness deeper than anything she could have imagined when she first stepped off that stagecoach in Weaverville. She had come west seeking a husband and a new beginning. She had found so much more: a true partner, a loving family, and a place where she belonged completely. As darkness fell, and the first stars appeared in the vast Montana sky, Preston rose, gently cradling the sleeping James. "Time to get these little ones to bed," he said softly. Olivia nodded, standing carefully with Mary in her arms. Together, they carried their children inside, a family forged not from the marriage Olivia had originally traveled west for, but from an unexpected meeting at a graveside and the simple, profound promise that she was not alone, and she never would be again.